She was hailed as one of Switzerland's most attractive women in the Miss Swiss contest of 2007. But fast forward 17 years, and Kristina Jovic was in the spotlight once again, but for the most sad and tragic of reasons. It all began with a phone call from her children's kindergarten. Unfortunately, Kristina had failed to pick them up at the end of the day. Naturally, her parents were deeply concerned by her sudden disappearance, but her husband, well, he didn't seem to care at all. Without her missing for longer than 24 hours, the authorities would actually refuse to intervene. And so, taking matters into his own hands, Kristina's father began to rummage around the family home, and what he found was utterly horrifying. So what was his sudden discovery? What else was Kristina Joksimovic known for? And what was her husband up to throughout all of this? Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, folks, and welcome back to Coffee House Crime. My name is Aiden, and today we're traveling to Switzerland to look at a very recent case. Now, I've had a lot of suggestions to cover this case, so of course you ask and I deliver. Today we're exploring the life of Kristina Jovic and her husband Mark Reiben, and the tragedy that fell between them. By the way, if you like true crime or dark stories, then please do consider subscribing. It really does help me out. And now with that out of the way, please grab yourself a coffee and let's caffeinate while we investigate. This is the case of Kristina Jovic. Guten Morgen and hallo meine Schweizer, and for the rest of you, welcome to Switzerland. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I think this is the first time here on Coffee House Crime. So before we dig into the gory details of this case, let's dive into this fantastic country. Known as one of Europe's central mountainous countries, Switzerland is home to many lakes, villages, and high peaks of the Alps. Quite honestly, it feels like there are more ski resorts and hiking trails than actual people themselves. But speaking of, around 9 million people call this place home, with Bern as its capital and Zurich as its most populated city. Travel about 1 hour north of Bern or an hour west of Zurich, and you'll find a city right on the border between France, Germany, and Switzerland. This quaint little town is named Basel, not to be confused with basil, which is a delicious herb found in pasta sauce and salads. Basel is quintessentially Swiss. It's a cute little place to visit with Gothic cathedrals, red sandstone buildings, and the River Rhine flowing right through it. I know we say this quite regularly, but you would not think a sinister thing could ever happen in a place so jolly. Well, sadly, our case today is about to blow all of that charm away. Found in the southwest of Basel lies a small municipality named Bingen. And on the night of February the 13th, 2024, an excessively gruesome discovery left the entire city absolutely horrified. It all began one day prior. Kristina's disappearance began when two grandparents received a phone call from their granddaughter's kindergarten. Apparently, their daughter Kristina, who was actually an ex-model and current entrepreneur, had failed to pick her children up after school. This was very odd because she loved her children and was a very responsible mother. To make things even more strange, they had a father who was also failing to respond to phone calls. So, what was going on? Well, after picking up the grandchildren from kindergarten, they then returned to the family home where they found Mark but not his wife Kristina. And to make things even more strange, he seemed totally unfazed by it. Now, Mark claimed that he had no idea where Kristina was, and instead offered her father a drink. She does this all the time, he said. She'll be back later. For several hours he appeared as if nothing had happened, and actually seemed quite jolly. He spoke to her parents as if it was just another day before eventually saying goodnight to the kids, and then bidding farewell to her parents. However, Kristina's father was not the type to just simply walk away and leave things as they are. He was deeply concerned about his daughter. So, instead of just walking out of the property and going home, he decided to thoroughly snoop around instead. You see, Kristina and Mark lived in an upscale home in Bingham. It was quite a large property with many nooks and crannies, so it did take her father quite a while to go from room to room and then eventually outside. Eventually he made his way down to the laundry room, which could be found in the basement at the end of the property. As you can see from this picture, it was more like an isolated bunker than anything else, with thick concrete walls and a steel sheet. door to keep it shut when he eventually made his way inside. He noticed several large bin bags in the corner of the room with, concerningly, what appeared to be blonde hair sticking out of one of them. Curiosity got the better of him. And you can probably guess what was inside. Tragically, it was the decapitated head of his daughter. After opening the bag and realizing what had happened, he ran out of the property screaming for help. Shortly after this, a phone call from a distraught father was made to the police, claiming that a woman had been brutally murdered and mutilated. During their due diligence, officers arrived at the home shortly after. It was pretty clear from the outset, Kristina Jovic was dead, and it was also quite clear that her husband was likely to blame. It was now time for her daughter's parents, and the rest of her family and friends to grieve to inconsolable levels. And the rest of the world desperately wanted to know what happened, so, with this terrible news, let's dive into the lives of Kristina and Mark and what led to her tragic end. So, beginning with Kristina. She is Kristina Joksimovic, somewhat of a special person and definitely different from your average 9-to-5 worker. In fact, I would go as far as to say that she has one of the most exciting careers I've come across. I mean, just the journey she's been through to go from one success to an entirely different type of success is very remarkable. Inspiring. Although she was a Biningan native and spent most of her life in Bern, she actually had deep Serbian roots through her parents. Moving into her young adulthood, Kristina would win the Miss Northwest Switzerland pageant in the year 2003, before going on to become a finalist in the Miss Switzerland competition in 2007. In addition to this, she also won several other accolades in the industry. So, it is safe to say that she was extraordinarily, conventionally attractive. However, her talents did not stop there. Oh no. In fact, they would come to light after ending her time on the catwalk in the wake of her pageant success. Once she got a little bit older, Kristina opened up her own business. Here, she would train other women to model for well-known fashion shows and catwalks. And in addition to this, she would also help newcomers prepare for contests and castings. But this was not quite enough for Kristina, and she was quite the multifaceted person too, working as an IT consultant for Google, while her business slowly started to pick up. Her business continued to grow and evolve, showcasing her versatility and determination. Her Instagram page, named Catwalk Coach, labels her as a high-heel expert motivator, entrepreneur, and mom. She provided one-on-one coaching for her clients and led workshops for Heels, another company which promotes confidence, femininity, and body positivity in the Basel area. Over on her website, she described herself as a model, Google recruiter, Miss Switzerland finalist, Miss Switzerland manager, and catwalk coach. Her customers included very big names such as Mercedes-Benz, HP, and Philips. In short, she had switched from modeling to becoming her very own catwalk coach, inspiring the next generation of models right down the runway. Among other things, she would also train Miss Switzerland candidates to follow in her footsteps, and she would also train other businesswomen to walk confidently in their professional or private lives. She was a strong woman who dedicated her life to empowering other women. But model, entrepreneur, and consultant aside, Kristina was also a wife and a proud mother of 2 young daughters. They were Vera Klee, born in 2020, and Kira Sophie, born in 2021. And from the many photos you can find of them online, you can see just how much she loved her family. Kristina was a good and friendly woman who was just as kind-hearted as she was beautiful. And these aren't the words of my own, but her many friends. But what would I say about her? Well, from the outside, Kristina looked confident, intelligent, disciplined, and extraordinarily loyal to her family. Quite honestly, I can see why so many people liked her. Now, although many of us see Kristina in a very positive light, the same thing could not be said for her husband. I mean, don't get me wrong, he did have friends and Kristina did love him, but many friends around her saw him as a bad-tempered brat. So let's talk about Mark and how he then came into Kristina's life, and unfortunately how he would end it. Age 41, Mark Rybin is 3 years older than Kristina. He was a well-respected change leader in the Barrel area, thanks to his father who essentially set him up for life as a millionaire and lawyer, prior to becoming a change leader. He was an officer in the Swiss Air Force, studied at the University of St. Gallen, and apparently went on to study at Stanford University too, in addition to... This Mark also ran his own business in lean, agile, and continuous improvement, skills that are alarmingly close to what I used to do before I sold my soul to YouTube. On his LinkedIn profile, he describes himself as a purpose-driven entrepreneur. According to him, life is all about people and sharing. I'm guessing he meant killing people and sharing misery, but he failed to be more specific about that part. Even going by his own Twitter posts, Mark was a very dull person. His life was boring as hell, further perpetuated by the corporate mud that he was stuck in. Anyway, it was in the year 2017 that Mark and Christina finally got married. Apparently their wedding was beautiful, up in a castle overlooking several hills and fields and... In addition to this, and as we already know, they would go on to have 2 beautiful daughters. Everything seemed perfect from the outside, or at least I should say from social media. You can find many pictures of them online where they seem absolutely smitten with each other. Picnics in the park, cuddling on the floor, candid selfies at home, and holidays abroad. What a beautiful life, right? But things were not so simple on the other side of that door. Christina's friends were not impressed by his behavior whatsoever, especially in the months before her death. One of her friends recalled them being in a crisis for several months. Apparently the police were even called out to their property after things became violent. And through witness statements and testimonies, another friend said, quote, Mark developed obsessive and compulsive tendencies when it came to his children. They were his perfect project, and Christina was in the way. He always thought that he was something better, and this came across perfectly on the children's birthdays when he separated their families and friends to have his side and her side over separately. But very little did Christina or her family know that he had a much nastier side to him too, and we know this to be true because it all comes from testimonies made by his former partner, Mark's former partner. Mark's former partner told the prosecution that apparently he used massive violence against her on several occasions. In fact, this was right up until April of 2016, which was just before he met Christina. Listing a couple of his crimes, he apparently drove over her foot with his car during one of his fits of rage, and he would even threaten to throw her out of the vehicle on the drive home. In addition to this, he also allegedly grabbed his former partner by the neck and then pushed her hard against the wall. It is alleged that he sometimes lost his control during their arguments, which caused him to hit or even strangle her, and apparently she was not his first casualty either. Without knowing any of this, Christina shared many beautiful photos online, believing that Mark was a perfect husband who would never hurt her soul. She described her husband as my rock in older photos and shared her pride as she announced that she was pregnant with his second child. And only months before her tragic death, she shared a photo of her family captioned, "My world. It is a tragedy that he would end it." Okay, so although we do technically have to assume that Mark is innocent until proven guilty, the evidence and information available, coupled with the testimonies made against him, do pretty much solidify that he was not a good person. But what really happened to Christina? Well, with this case not yet through the courts, we do have to take everything with a slight pinch of salt, but this is what we know so far. To begin with, Mark actually first claimed that he didn't murder Christina at all. In fact, he would say that he found her in the laundry room and then dismembered her in a panic. But after realizing that he could not weave his way through forensic evidence, he admitted to murdering her instead, claiming it was self-defense. Apparently she ran towards him with a knife. However, analysis conducted by medical and forensic experts would contradict these claims. Instead, they determined that based on the marks on her neck, that she was strangled. And believe me, that was not everything that the autopsy reports would confirm. The autopsy report had a lot more troubling information. It further concluded that Christina was decapitated with a jigsaw, a knife, and a pair of garden shears. Mark also broke her hip joints out of their sockets and would go on to conduct disarticulation, which is the removal of bone from its joint. Investigators also found out that while cutting up her body, he played multiple YouTube videos on his iPhone, but interestingly enough, he refuses to give officers the passcode, meaning that he likely has something to hide. He would also carefully remove her womb, which was the only organ to be cut out of her torso, And this deliberate mutilation is believed to indicate that Mark probably has a mental disorder, or at least according to the court. Then, he forced some of his wife's body parts into a powerful industrial blender in which those parts were then pureed. Other parts that didn't make it in there were instead dissolved in a chemical solution. The parts that did not receive either of those two despicable fates would instead express signs of blunt force trauma before her death. This included cuts on her cheek, under her eyebrow and nose, several bruises on her right lower leg and foot, and further bruising on her shoulder blades and the back of her head. Upon closer examination, her head revealed that some of her hair was ripped out. It is also noted that the residue and evidence left behind at the crime scene indicated that most of his horrible actions were committed inside that laundry room. All in all, he spent several hours tending to his wife's dead body. Mark then continued as if nothing had happened. Not only that, but he stared at her father right in the eye, shared a drink with him, and told him that she would eventually return. But as we know, her father was just as persistent as he was worried, and after thoroughly searching the house, he would unfortunately come across his own daughter's head, which really does have to be the worst thing you could find if you think about it. In the time between finding his daughter's head and the police arriving, he would actually confront Mark about the discovery, who, by the way, seemed absolutely gobsmacked, likely because he was not expecting it to be found. And believe it or not, but while being arrested and then led away, he would even tell her parents that they had overstayed their welcome and that things would have been easier if they did not stumble across her. What precisely drove Mark to murder his wife still remains a mystery. Legal proceedings and consequences. Without any license expert weighing in on this, we expose ourselves to too much interpretation. Nevertheless, we do at least have a kind of confession, and we also know from Christina's friends that she did actually intend to divorce him, so allegedly, apparently, maybe this is what pushed this psycho over the edge. Surprisingly, Mark would appeal for his release from custody at the Basel Landschaft Coercive Measures Court shortly after being arrested. After being rejected from this, he then went on to the Canal Court, who also showed him the door. Finally, he then appealed to the federal court, which, no surprise, also dismissed him. According to the status of the investigation, Mark apparently displays concrete indications of some sort of mental illness. He also shows a conspicuously elevated level of criminal energy, severe lack of empathy, and cold-bloodedness. They would also claim that his efforts to cover up her death and then pretend like nothing had happened in front of her father clearly display some kind of sadistic sociopathic tendencies. In a friend's own words, he showed no remorse. How deranged do you have to be to not show a single emotion? No doubt Mark will be put on trial for her murder, but we just have to see if he is found guilty and how long of a sentence he will receive. The death penalty is forbidden in Switzerland, but murder does carry a minimum sentence of 10 years and up to life imprisonment. However, even life imprisonment carries a parole period of only 15 years. So sadly, there is a chance that Mark could return to society one day to add to the pain that Christina's family must now endure. There is an ongoing custody battle over who will look after her children now that she is dead. Her parents and sister are currently working together to provide them with a safe, warm, and loving home. But sadly, Mark's own sister is now trying to claim custody. She also claims that Christina's parents are simply too old to take care of them. This has now become quite a large legal battle, but Mark's sister is, unfortunately, supported by her and Mark's millionaire father and his fellow lawyers. So, this is not an easy fight for Christina's family. Honestly, I would argue that Mark's disgusting actions should waver his family's rights away. Put quite simply, Christina's children deserve to be in a home where the narrative of their freak of a father will not be changed. And on the other side of it, Christina's family has absolutely endured enough pain and hardship. They don't deserve to lose their grandchildren on top of their daughter. But focusing back on Christina, she was a strong, confident, and exceptional young woman. She always had new ideas and was full of energy, and was always there for her friends and family and would always listen. Despite her big boss energy, she was a compassionate and loving mother who devoted her time to her children. children who must now grow up without an amazing mother by their side. 8 months after her death, their home is now entirely abandoned. Furniture may remain within its four walls, but the house itself is empty and dark. Numerous flower tributes lie outside of the front door, and the stairs leading up to the property are completely overgrown with weeds, as are the pavement slabs in the back garden, where a barbecue and children's toys still remain to this day. Christina's grave features various flowers, a framed picture, 2 crosses, small heartstones, and drawings by her daughters. It is very clear that many people desperately miss her to this day. Just a small thing that I'd like to share, as it resonates with my thoughts, but in an interview, Christina's friend wants people to know that just because a relationship looks perfect on the outside does not mean that it is. You have to be vigilant, not just for yourself but for others too. And at least for now, that is where our story ends. But quite honestly, I'm very curious to know how the case unfolds and what we learn about Mark. As always, keep tuned to the channel and I'll be sure to feature this case in another update video in the not too distant future. With that said, I'm going to leave this video here today, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in. I know this one is shorter than usual, but this is all the information we have. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and thank you to all of you who recommended this case to me. By the way, if you want to support the channel, check out my Patreon here, or alternatively, check out my social media here, most notably, my Instagram. And by the way, I'm going on lots of small adventures in the future, so please do check that out. So I guess I'll see you again very soon for another video, likely in a few days. However, until that moment arrives, remember to look after yourself, look after each other, and as always, stay safe. Thank you and goodbye.